Chalas. You know, I was thinking about Ambassador Kimonyo earlier on, right? And how this Northern Corridor Summit is happening. And then Teddy O came and read the news as President Kenyatta is hosting President YK Museveni, President Paul Kagame. They're in town today. There's a representative from Juba. Because those brothers are still, in between talks and stuff.
Baba is still mediating.
Baba is mediating. So it reminds me. I was thinking of my a good friend of mine who I used to work with back in the day. His name is Buchizia Msateka.
Buchizia Msateka.
Yes, originally from Malawi. No, I'm sorry, from Zambia. He's got Malawi roots, but originally from Zambia. But this guy, man, I mean, he was first based in Tanzania. His first job for Reuters, Tanzania. In Tanzania, man, during the time of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. Do you remember that name?
Yeah.
In your history books?
Yes, Mwalimu, I know Mwalimu.
Mwalimu Julius. He was there in Tanzania during that time. So he learned his journalism under that whole umbrella of Mwalimu, right? And from Tanzania, he was rebased in Kampala, right? When we was Kampala, I mean, this was the early 80s. Early 80s, early to mid 80s, maybe mid to late 80s, based in Kampala. So 1986, Museveni comes in, right? He literally marches into Kampala with 28 men, takes over, right? One thing led to another. He was installed as president, and to this day, he's still there. So M7 and Buchi developed a relationship. Him, the Reuters correspondent, M7, the newly arrived head of state, trying to clean up Uganda. Right? So he would have dinner. Let's say they'd have dinner maybe once a week at Museveni's house, because he just had a house down the road in Kampala. In, was it Toyoyo? Is that what it's called? In that area. So Buchi would show up. Museveni, of course, would be there. Madame would be cooking. And then there'll be this other skinny, tall, slender gentleman also invited to dinner. And then, Museveni would be speaking and he'd say, hey, so Paul, what are your thoughts about this? What are your thoughts, Paul? Of course, Buchi came to know that later on, the skinny, tall, elegant fellow was Paul Kagame. He was actually Museveni's head of military intelligence, because he had fled Rwanda in a previous genocide, ended up in Uganda, met up with Yoweri, and they developed a relationship, and they were there in the house together as his head of military intelligence, right? And then once in a while...
So Paul worked for
YK. Head of military intelligence for Uganda. Once in a while, a short, fat, overweight, stubbly man would come in, right? And join them for dinner. And they would be talking now, regional politics. And YK would always refer to this short, stout man as Mzee Tatu. His name was Mzee Tatu. So again, Buchi, he would note that, Mzee Tatu is here, Paul Kagame is here, YK is, they're talking straight, they're talking regional. They're talking down, they were talking vision and legacy 10, 20 years down the line. Fast forward. 1994 genocide happens in Rwanda. People flee. Museveni, of course, and all of them are monitoring what's going on. Kagame says, you know what? We've been training our forces, a very small rebel force. It's time to go in. If we don't go in and check this genocide, all the Tutsis will be annihilated. So Museveni gives him some troops, a few arms. Kagame goes in. Just like Museveni had done with 28 men, Kagame went in with a very small rebel force. And they managed to repel the Interahamwe and chase them out and made it to Kigali and stabilized it. Right? So now this is Museveni and his right-hand man. He's now let him go and sort things out in his country. That was done. And they became friends, tight brothers, all the way, even to this day. In the meantime, trouble has broken out in nearby, it was called Zaire then, led by Mobutu Sese Seko Kuku Mbengwa Zabanga, right? Mobutu. And in the meantime, the rebels, there's a whole rebel force in Eastern Congo, and they're saying, you know what, maybe this is a time to send Mobutu home after 32 years in power. Let's go in. Again, Museveni, the godfather, gives Mzee Tatu, who is the guy who has been in the house. Remember, every Friday he shows up for dinner? Museveni gives Mzee Tatu troops. Mzee Tatu gets his own rebel force, and they start marching. From Kisangani in the east, they marched 2,000 kilometers. And these are young boys. You could remember all those pictures of little young boys in gumboots. They call them Watoto or Batoto. This young troops, literally child soldiers. They marched 2,000 kilometers by foot from Kisangani all the way to Kinshasa. By foot through jungle. I mean, it reminded me of Napoleon back in 1804 trying to march to Moscow from Paris. It was crazy in the wintertime. But these guys, they marched 2,000 clicks and they made it to Kinshasa and they chased Mobutu out. So when the guys, right before they reached Kinshasa, again, my friend Bucci, who was now the regional correspondent, he was a hotshot reporter over there. He met up with these troops and he was marching with them. You know, he gained their confidence and trust and was marching with them. And at the time, the world didn't know who was the leader of these troops. They kept hearing Kabila here, some guy called Laurent Kabila, but nobody knew what he looked like or who he was. So Bucci is marching with the rebels one day and he says, listen guys, we've heard all these stories. Who's this Kabila guy? You guys are almost reaching Kinshasa. Nobody has a photo of Kabila. Who is this Laurent Kabila? They say, don't worry. Mzee tutakuonesha. They all spoke Swahili, fluent. So they get to this base of this temporary base, and they tell Bucci, look, he's over there. Let's go ask permission. If he says he wants to see you, it's fine. If not, boom. So Bucci goes. He's sitting under a tree waiting for permission. Then his permission is granted. He's still okay. Commander says, the general says you can come see him. Bucci walks up to this house, makeshift tent, and as he's about to enter, this guy comes out. And Bucci looks at him and says, he laughs. He says, Mzee Tatu, ni wewe. Remember the guy in the dinner?
At the dinner.
At Museveni's house?
Yes.
Way back? Mm-hmm. The guy they referred to as Mzee Tatu? Mm-hmm. That was Laurent Kabila. Bucci had known all these people all along.
So Bucci knew President Museveni, President Kagame, and President Kabila. What?
All these guys planning the whole regional shift, because it was about the shift of power from Mobutu, from Obote, from the Interahamwe, Habyarimana, and all those guys in the forces in Rwanda. These guys were reshaping the politics of East and Central Africa for the next 50, 100 years. Can you imagine those guys at that dinner table? And Mzee Tatu looked at Bucci and said, oh, my son, how are you? And they got along and they had such a great relationship because he had seen him at that dinner at that man's house. Can you imagine? You can't make this stuff up, bro.
That's what we call
a story a day.